This week on Bruh Meets World.
After they go, he just kind of has a quiet moment. He puts his hand on Topanga's desk and says, "I love you all, class dismissed." And it's just like I remember breaking down, crying in tears, hysterical. It just broke me because I think in that moment, it really became clear to me as a kid that like my journey with these characters are over.
And then for him to say, "I love you all," like, that all was speaking to us.
It was all of us, yeah.
Extended. Class dismissed. Again, in a show that basically was like, "Hey, I've taught you everything I can teach you."
I can't, bro. I can't talk about it.
When this boy meets world.
What up, bros?
What up, bros?
And welcome to Bruh Meets World, your Boy Meets World finale.
When it's Bruh Meets World.
I'm Siege.
And I am Tony Curtis.
You guys, we did it! Tony, we did it!
Crossing the finish line today after 7 years.
After doing it, I was like, oh, wow. After watching this final episode, I was like, for those of you who don't know, Tony and I have spoken about this quite frequently, that the whole purpose was to start something and finish something from beginning to end. We started this podcast and we were just like, hey, no matter how long it takes, it took 7 years, no matter what happens, we just want to do something from beginning to end. We didn't know that each of us had undiagnosed ADHD at the time.
Of course.
And we have moved states. We have made so many changes. But at the end of the day, we have done all of Boy Meets World at this point in time.
It's watching the actual last episode was emotional, and then honestly preparing for this was emotional because it was, just for our listeners to know, we are going to do a season 7 recap and a series recap. So this isn't like our last episode, but there is a lot of emotions going into it, just understanding where we are, seeing the finale, seeing these characters that we've gotten to know so intimately because we've discussed their lives in such great detail that they truly have felt like friends. The fact that throughout this journey, we've become friends with these cast members that we've seen on television is so surreal. So this is a really like emotional moment, and I think I'm happy to be here.
It is. I just like I had to acknowledge it. I like honestly like after the episode played, and it was just like done, and I saw and we got to the finale, which we'll get to. I literally just sat there and I was like, wow, I did it. Like it's so crazy. Okay, you guys, thank you so much for joining us once again for a Boy Meets World recap. We do have a little announcement at the end of this episode. So if you usually like drop off after we do our grades, hold on for a little bit because there is like a little announcement. But after that, we do want to encourage you guys, as Tony said, we're not disappearing from your headphones, so to speak. We will be doing more recaps. We, of course, will be joining Boy Meets World on their series or season review report cards. We have our own report cards. We have a couple of other episodes that we have in mind. So we still want to hear from you. So if you feel like telling us what this journey has been for you, please reach out to us at bruhmeetsworld@gmail.com, or you can reach out to us at bruhmeetsworld on all the places. If you are watching our YouTube, we appreciate you being here and following us through this journey. And if you're listening to us on a podcast, make sure that you hit that subscribe and know that we appreciate you as well.
Absolutely.
Again, I like, honestly, it's like I'm so like crazy. It's so crazy to me to like be saying these words. Yeah. But Tony, why don't you give us our final tell me about it?
Last week I did like a really special tell me about it. And this week, like after watching the episode and kind of reflecting on everything, I really just felt like there wasn't a whole lot left to say. So this is my final tell us about it. It is simple, it is sweet, and here we go. Tell us about it. Dream, try, do good. And no, I do not mean do well as the class gets dismissed in this final farewell.
I love it. You're right. It was short. It was sweet. This is absolutely amazing. And I don't like. We're just gonna have to get into it because I'm just gonna be overwhelmed. But as you said, we still have other episodes that we're doing. So, you guys, this is season 7, episode 23, A Brave New World, part 2. As all the friends say goodbye to each other, they all make one last stop to Mr. Feeny's classroom for their last goodbye to Mr. Feeny, where he gives them his very last piece of advice. There's not really much else to say than that in our roll call, just to like get it out of the way. We do have one little guest appearance, I guess you could say, who plays Joshua Matthews. He is not new, but it is Daniel Jacobs. He was the creepy kid in the hallway earlier.
Just all dead people, yeah.
And now he is Insta baby, like Insta toddler.
They little Nickied him.
They little Nickied him. So, yeah, that is our little one roll call that I wanted to call out. But Tony, first impressions.
Ooh, a lot actually. First I'll say that a lot of the criticisms I had about the first part of the finale, I think were overcome in this part. This is absolutely the stronger of the parts, and to me, it's giving me everything I wanted that I didn't really have in the first episode. I will say that I thought that the recap of the last episode was a little strange. It was like long, and they included all the clips in the recap. Like, okay, whatever. But really, like, the main things were I loved seeing the parents get their due in this episode. I loved basically like Alan, Amy, and Feeny, who were really excluded from the last episode, got a chance to have their moments in this episode in a way that I think brought a lot of completion. And I will say that the last like scene of this show is up there with maybe the greatest of all the scenes that we've had in the series. Like, I'm really trying hard to think of a scene that I think encapsulates everything I love about this show as much as the last scene of this episode. So that's my first impression. Where are you? How do you feel?
I want to say that very similar to you. I was like, it was weird watching the intro, like just the intro music for the very last time. And was like, I'm so sentimental. I was like, I don't think I've seen the finale since we've started doing this podcast. Because I wanted to save it. So to see it again, it really did bring up a lot of emotions. I will say that it does what it wanted to do so well. I was so emotional. I had so many feelings. And I think that you're right in the sense that at least with the core 4, and when I say core 4, I mean Topanga, Cory, Shawn, and Eric. And then even if we want to, Feeny, so core 5.
Yeah.
If we really just focus on them, this is such a good space for us to leave.
Sure.
And I can't wait to really go into how this episode handles that final scene. However, I will also say, because what we do here is critique, there are a lot of things on this episode where I was like, I have thoughts.
Yeah, sure.
So going right into it, I will say, right along with you, I was like, we basically did the entire episode that we just watched in the recap. Like, they wanted to make sure you saw all those clips again, do all the journey. It's like, basically, it was the clip show removing any of like the world building.
I have to imagine that this was the like to be continued our last week on Boy Meets World that was aired when the show was syndicating, which is why they included so much to kind of let people know of the language of the episode being in clips and kind of letting people know what's been going on. But to watch it in a streaming format is odd, and they maybe should do a re-edit of that. We start with Eric and Alan.
Yeah.
And
so really quickly, what they did when they were doing the recap is, I don't think we discussed this, and it made me think of when Eric says, I can go to New York, I can be anyone I want to be. And Topanga says, I want you to be Eric. I don't remember discussing that.
No, I don't think we did either.
Happen?
Yeah, it did. It was a brief comment, and it flashed back to that scene of him playing with her face that was covered in like the
Yeah,
avocado
yeah.
stuff. But no, she did say that, which,
And
by
I
the
was
way,
like,
such a sweet thing to say to Eric, considering he's constantly seeking that.
that's what I'm saying. Like for me, I was like, that's such a great moment because like it does validate Eric, and it's this thing to where I wish we got more of. We got more of Topanga and Eric, these in-laws, like
Yeah,
this makeshift family, and what is that like? And the
sure.
idea that again, especially in the last few episodes, Topanga has always understood the value that Eric brought to the table.
Yeah, I mean, I think they could have done more, honestly, with the Topanga and Eric relationship. I feel like there was many episodes throughout the season where we were like, oh, they could have given them
Yeah.
a little story here, or even when they did that god awful wait storyline, I
Oh
was
my
like, we were
God.
like, oh, they could have done this so much better. Or the
Yeah.
episode What a Drag. They had
Yeah.
moments between Eric and Topanga that I was like, wow, they could have done this better. So, I mean, it was nice to see him get that little moment. The thing I want to talk about with Eric kind of relates actually to that.
Oh.
Topanga says, we like you, I like you just the way you are. I love this, Eric. But when we are introduced to Eric in this episode, we see him with Amy and Alan, and the first thing he says is, you guys aren't going to miss me at all, are you? This character has gotten no love from his central community. We proceed to do flashbacks of him and Alan, some of which are heartfelt, but some of which show Alan having just as much, not disdain, but just like, I don't know. He just doesn't seem to really care about Eric that much. Like I felt unclear through the clips of him jumping out of the plane. You'd rather jump out of a plane than be with me and all that stuff. I was like, Alan has consistently underestimated Eric. He's consistently having to be convinced that Eric's going to be okay and that, Eric has value. And it's always a surprise for Alan. So, like, of course, Eric feels that way. And it's interesting that, like, in one of the scenes they flash back to, they're in the museum talking about the monkey. And Eric says to Alan, I've always just tried to be the person that I thought you wanted me to be. And I was just like, wow, this is what it's all been about. The over the top antics, the humor, the silly cartoonish behavior has all been in search for love and attention that he never got from his dad.
So it's so funny that you say that because my biggest first note is what he says after you said all that. He says, I didn't think you'd want to hear it from me. When Eric is talking about like his take on art, and then he says, so what else do you want to talk about? Neoclassicism, Baroque. Like he just starts listing out all of these different things, showing that Eric actually does take an interest in certain things,
Yeah.
and seeing how he responded to the orchestra when Feeny took him. Again, it's like, no, Eric has a desire and a drive for things that he finds interesting.
Sure.
And he can actually be really intelligent when he is given a platform and actually listened to, but he is written off. And it's so funny because I listened to Pod Meets World season 5 premiere.
Mhm.
It's brothers, and in that episode, it is all about Eric going off to college
Mhm.
and how much Alan is just happy he's here and how much Alan loves him. And we often talk about, or the pod often talks about, how they didn't really care about Eric for seasons 1 through 4. Like they're
Mhm.
like, oh, these parents never acknowledge Eric. They don't really care. But then we do get little bits where it's like Alan's like, you're my pride and joy. You're my best friend. I'm so
Yeah.
excited. And I think that what you're talking about with Alan and Eric is Alan doesn't have faith in his son, but he does favor his oldest son.
Yeah.
And that's a weird thing, but maybe now that Joshua's here, he's like, oh, I have another chance to do it right. So
Yeah, to think about that, those moments where he wants to play basketball with Eric. And I mean, even that episode where they're jumping out of the plane kind of stems from Cory feeling like Alan prefers to do more athletic things with Eric. It feels like Eric has filled the place of a friend for Alan.
yeah,
In a way that where his whole family is his whole social group, so he doesn't really have friends anymore. We never see him hanging out with anyone. He doesn't work at the grocery store anymore. He had friends there. Now he just works in the family business. I'm assuming Amy helps him at the store.
yeah.
So it's like he doesn't have a social life. So I feel like Eric plays a key part in his life for that. But in terms of being a parent to him, he lacks a lot of faith in his abilities.
Well, what's interesting about that is, remember how I told you these clip shows from last episode and even in this episode, they are supposed to tell us a story. They
Yeah.
are telling us what we should remember about these characters.
Yeah.
And I thought it was so important that for the most part, I know we get our clips later, but for the most part, they show Alan and Amy being Eric's parents.
Yes, I noticed that as well.
There are very few clips of their other kids. There are very few clips of they don't intersperse it between Eric and Amy and like, oh no, we literally get 2 or 3 clips of Alan and just 2 clips of Amy.
Which, by the way, are from
the
the same episode because they've only ever given Amy one independent storyline within 7 years of this show. What?
Correct. And I was like, it is, again, this is how you want us to remember these people.
Yeah.
As good parents, so to speak, but also, I'll take that back. How I take away is you want us to remember these parents as human, as like, they were breaking the mold. They were the cool dad and the mom who went back to school. Like, I think that's great. But we don't really see them parenting all of their kids. We don't really get to see a clip of how great of a marriage they had.
Sure.
You know? And I just think that was something that I looked at and I was like, while this is the better episode for Amy, they don't show Amy and Cory at all.
And I thought about that too, because I was like, well, we're really missing the perspective of their marriage independent from the kids. It would have been nice to have a moment maybe prior to the scene where Amy and Alan are kind of like, Alan's consulting Amy as she's upset, like outside privately. And there's this like quick flashback of them just in their like little cute marriage and the things they've done with each other throughout the years. It doesn't have to be very long, like 2 or 3 clips. It doesn't have to be like, a 5-minute montage. But I just thought it was interesting to your point that we don't even see Cory and Amy really get any love. So it's
zero clips. We get a clip of Morgan for Cory.
Yeah.
Not one clip of Cory and Amy.
Yeah.
And I just thought that was, again, that's interesting considering this is a show centered around Ben. And this is what it was. It was like Ben's show. And the fact that you don't have any clips of the main star with his mother figure.
It's almost as if the show is saying we're all as concerned for Eric as the parents are, whereas Cory we're not so concerned with because he has Topanga.
Correct. So again, that's just like I wanted to point that out. Then we get Ghost Chat, and
I'm sorry. Right before we get to Ghost Chat, I just want to say there's a joke that I really love here where Amy is saying to Cory, "Now don't get Topanga pregnant until you're ready," and Eric answers, "I won't." That was funny.
It was a good joke. I loved it. It was great time. Will delivered it. I think that was like a genuine. I don't know if that was an improv, but it was very fun. You could tell that they were having really fun on the set. And also, because of the logic of Girl Meets World, that's exactly what happens. Because Girl Meets World comes out in 2014 when we meet Riley, who's 13.
Sure.
Which means that Topanga went to New York, studied for this internship, got pregnant within a year.
Wow. Yeah.
And then Girlie had to do law school while having a newborn and being married to Cory.
The growth that must have happened in their relationship during that point definitely could have been a spinoff of its own for sure.
Oh, absolutely. I just thought that was very interesting that she would say, don't have kids until you're ready. And then the show's logic is they had kids immediately.
Right away. Well, you mentioned Ghost Chet, and so I want to talk about the Hunters for a second. We had a lot to say about the way that they were treating Jack and Shawn's character last episode. Am I wrong in assuming that they already decided that Jack was going to go to the Peace Corps in the last episode?
Thank you. I was like, am I going mad when they were like, when he goes, you know what? You convinced me. I was like, convinced him of what? He's like, Rachel, save me a spot on that boat. For what?
Yeah.
You at the Peace Corps. It's like, but you already made that decision. Like you made it loudly last episode.
Yeah.
Did I miss something? I literally had to go back because I was like, what are we talking about? She had made the decision last episode.
And they've been talking about the Peace Corps since Angela's ashes. And honestly, if it's only 3 episodes, you know what I mean? Like you could have very easily made it to where Jack got an offer to work at his dad's firm. He was kind of second guessing if he wanted to do it. And Rachel kept talking about the Peace Corps until this moment to give it some significance. Because honestly, the idea that Jack is like looking at Shawn about to take on a new challenge, feeling proud of him, feeling inspired by him, and being like, hey, you came from nothing and you did so much with your life that, like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm giving it all up and I'm going to the Peace Corps. I want to help people. I want to put good into the world and influence them the way you influenced me. Like, I love all of that. But it's all cheapened because we knew he was going to the Peace Corps ahead of time.
Yeah, like it's kind of insane.
Yeah.
It's like this is a 2-parter. So in theory, you filmed this back to back. Did no one look at the script and be like, didn't we just cover this? Like, even from an editor's perspective, you and I just watched it. We're like, wait a minute, this feels familiar. Did I miss a scene? Did something
and
get
this
cut
all aired in one night, so like
That's what I'm saying.
it must have been very confusing watching it live to get that information as if it was new. Hey guys, I'm here editing the episode, and this whole Jack going to the Peace Corps thing was really bothering me. I went back and rewatched the last episode, Brave New World Part 1, and he actually mentions it within the first scene, like,
I did it. I joined the Peace Corps. It's a plan, all right? My stepdad thinks he's gonna teach me a lesson. No, I'm gonna teach him a lesson.
so he does mention it in last episode, but what I found was the transcripts for Brave New World Part 2, and there is a deleted scene between Rachel and Jack that takes place in the kitchen. Siege is on vacation right now, so I'm going to act this out best I can, but I wanted you guys to know this because I think it's really important. We cut to a scene of Jack and Rachel in the kitchen talking. Rachel says, "When's your boat leaving, Jack?" Jack smiles, "What's the difference? I ain't on it. My stepdad heard about my Peace Corps idea and he freaked. He spotted me all the money I need. I'm Jack.com lives, baby." Rachel, "Oh, that's too bad." Jack, "Why?" Rachel, "I was looking forward to being Peace Corps buddies with you." Jack, "But I thought you were going to travel the world." Rachel, "I will, right after I do some good on it." Jack, "So you're going to go to the Peace Corps?" Rachel shakes his hand, "And you're going to be rich." That's where that scene cuts. And then right after that, we get Eric telling Topanga, "Oh, I can go to New York. I can be whoever I want to be." But that scene, I think, is so important. And it's so crazy to me that they cut it because it really does help us make sense of Jack's storyline. He got the funding for I'm Jack.com, talked to Shawn, and then decided that he didn't want to go. So I know that's a lot. I just wanted to throw that in here because I thought that was really interesting. And yeah, here we go. Yeah.
But when you look at it critically, like, but I don't like you were already, as far as I know, the paperwork's signed.
Yeah, it would have been far more effective to have Jack in the earlier half in last episode just be struggling with this idea of like, you know, I think I'm just gonna do what my stepfather says. You know, he's rich. I trust him. I don't know. Like being torn. There's none of that going on. So it's very weird. But to your point, I will say there's a lot of emotional smoke and mirrors because during this revelation, you have Ghost Chet pop up, which Blake Clark, he's such a charismatic son of a bitch that like you're really so like engaged in what's happening that you're kind of overlooking the script problems a little bit, I think.
Because I'm not gonna lie, Ghost Chat showed up and I was like, I love Blake. I'm so glad that we have him here. I'm so glad that they did like their little impressions of him. I thought that was hilarious. And I will say, that entire segment of Blake being like, money don't make you rich, family makes you rich.
Yeah.
No, makes you rich. It's money.
Yeah.
Like I was like, I love
Ryder breaks a little bit there too.
Yeah, he nails it. He nails it so emphatically, and I couldn't get enough. And I was like, this is why they brought you back. I'm with you, where it's like, I don't think they should have brought you back now, but I'm happy that they brought you back. Also,
Well,
go ahead.
I was just gonna say that I actually think him coming back is what saves Shawn's redemption arc, because last episode we had a really hard time being like, why is Shawn going to New York? It truly doesn't make sense. This isn't how we really envisioned his character arc ending. But I think this episode really reframes his journey as someone who is, as the episode says, brave new world, brave enough to step into a new world after overcoming all the obstacles in his life. And by having Chet there smiling down from heaven, presumably proud of his son for taking this step, I think it allows there to be some emotional closure to his character that just wasn't there last episode.
So you say that, and to me, I'm like, you know what's actual growth? Staying in letting go of your codependent relationship.
Oh, sure. Yeah, for sure.
And actually defining a life of your own where you're at. Working on the relationship with your brother who just graduated and doesn't really have anything to do.
Yeah.
Going to Europe and discovering yourself on your own, as we know you will eventually do.
Yeah.
All of those things are actual growth. Going with Cory to join him and his wife in New York, I don't know how much growth that is.
And to be clear, I 100% agree with you. I think that's why I call it smoke and mirrors, because the appearance of Chet kind of emotionally glosses over those things so that you feel there's some cathartic ending, even though truly, if you examine, the plot of Shawn's life, it's not really giving the grand farewell that we would have envisioned for him.
Absolutely. And there are a few more things. One, this is really small. It's not important. But Chet is wearing different clothes than he was when we last saw him.
When he died?
Yeah, I was like, does heaven have like a barbershop? Like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
Like, y'all couldn't have like made some effort. I don't know. Like, it's little things to me. Or either that, the way I see it is either you make him look exactly like we saw him last time, or you glam it up. You're like, he's in a white suit. Give me Southern Baptist Chet. You know what I'm saying? Like,
a nice touch would have been the same outfit he was wearing when he had his heart attack. I think that would have been a nice touch.
That's what I'm saying. Like, that's just like, it's the little things. So there's that. And then also, we have to talk about
him sexually assaulting Rachel as a ghost.
Chet violating Rachel. I was like, that is my bruh moment. If you need one, they gave us one more for the road.
Also, let's really think about this. The last moment that Rachel McGuire has on this series is getting essayed by a ghost. Correct. What's happening? Like,
an older man.
The treatment of Rachel truly has been abysmal. I know we're going to get to this in the season 7 recap and the series recap and all those things, but like, after seeing this whole series now, Control Alt Delete Rachel. Like, I don't even know if she really served a purpose to or made the show stronger in any way. Like, I just don't think they knew what to do with her character, how to utilize Maitland's natural, comedic tendencies. She's a great physical performer. She has great, she's able to kind of have a mature take on things that the other characters don't, that they never really took advantage of. And so it just feels like a character that was so underutilized that at this point, I think you could have done without her.
That's kind of like what Maitland's character could have been, like this strong, mature voice for the girls, someone for the guys to like, let's have her talk more about women's studies or like whatever. Like, we just had a chance to make her into a like a spiritual guide or, like whatever Feeny was. Like, we still needed Feeny, but like having a peer that's kind of like the same thing or like a little bit wiser would have been great. And to your point, we've always talked about her physical comedy, amazing. Even in this episode, when she's getting violated by Chet, that journey of like, oh, hey, something just happened, but I'm also not supposed to know because what happened was a ghost and I can't tell anyone about it.
Yeah.
She plays that perfectly.
Yeah.
And yet this is how we exit for her. And then on top of that, this is a great segue into the fact that they're like, okay, let's all go. And I'm like, why is everybody going? Like, especially knowing,
where is Rachel and Jack going that they need to all leave together?
This is what I was like very confused by. Then we get, as I said earlier, Joshua, baby Josh.
Josh, out of nowhere. This kid was just born a year ago.
I said Baby Joshua is not really canon. He is for Michael and the audience. That is
Yes.
what this is for.
This
So
is
in my
nepotism
mind,
at its finest, 100%.
hey, I have no problem with nepotism because it's been around forever. If anything, we always want to have access to give our children an opportunity and a chance to do something that we couldn't do for ourselves.
You know what? You're right. That's true. But then you have moments where Northwest is singing "I Just Can't Wait to Be King" in a lion in like a lion pajama, and you realize nepotism has its limits. And to be real, having Joshua age so much, I think Cory's monologue to Joshua would have been just as impactful if he was talking to an infant. Like
I
if
completely agree.
like there was truly no reason for Joshua to jump up in age. So that's my complaint with it. It's not that I have an issue with all nepotism. I have an issue with the fact that they altered Joshua's age in order to make this nepotism happen.
Well, and I, like I said, I was like, this is not canon to me. This
Yeah.
is for Michael. This is for the audience. This is to give us this very cute kid to kind of exit out on.
But it's also the same, like to your point at the beginning of the episode, it's the same kid who was introduced to us in the college married dorms as being like a creepy kid who can see dead people. And he was so memorable in that episode that to throw him back in the same season as a different character is so strange and bizarre.
Here's the thing. I don't disagree with you. I just say I'm willing to look past the Nepo casting because I was like, oh, ultimately, this entire scene is a fourth wall break.
Yeah. Yeah.
That we don't need to look too closely at because we are being meta. And if we are being meta, then just it kind of all flies. You know
I
what
will
I'm saying?
say that like part of what helps me as a fan to kind of overlook this age discrepancy of Joshua is Cory's monologue. I love it. I love the
Yes.
monologue from start to
Yes.
finish. I love him joking, Feeny will teach you in every grade you're ever in. And he says this beautiful, you know, line, even though the world goes out of its way to teach us hard lessons, it's the same world that gave you your friends and family. You'll come to believe that the world's going to protect you. Haha, Boy Meets World. Now I get it. I was like, oh, you guys are just having fun with this. And you know what? I think that like those meta fourth wall break moments are a great little wink to the audience that like, hey, we're all saying goodbye together. And so I think it actually really strengthens the episode when they have those. And I just think the monologue is just really well written.
Absolutely. Boy Meets World. Now I get it.
Yeah.
That's great. Like it's fantastic. Because again, it's so self-referential. It's so in the spirit of how Boy Meets World has been in the past.
And also kind of referencing how everyone thought the name of the show was kind of stupid when they first came up with it.
Yeah. Now I get it. Like
now now it makes sense.
Now it makes sense. And so yes, no, I absolutely love the speech. I thought it was fantastic. I thought it was iconic. Something that we'll get into a little bit later, but like there are plenty of sitcoms and a lot that don't necessarily nail their ending.
Yeah.
And I will say that when I look at this episode, I don't think it nails the ending in terms of storytelling, but I think that it absolutely encaptures what Boy Meets World was supposed to be about, what its legacy has been about. And I think that emotionally, it's 10 out of 10. So that's what this speech is. This speech is like, hey, we're gonna step outside of the world that we've created and just talk to the audience.
You know, I love that you said that because, you know, I kind of wrote something very similar in terms of like, not everything about this episode is great, but I think the show is a great example of what Boy Meets World has always tried to be. And in these moments where like, I would much rather take a swing and a miss than you not to try at all. The reason why we're talking about this show in 2024 is because of all the swings that it hit and all the swings that it hit well. And sometimes, you know, you have a player that hits it out of the park and sometimes they strike out, but like, if they have more hits than strikes, then it kind of makes up for it. And I think in this series finale, I think it really shows how well the show is able to make up for their misses. And one thing I will say in terms of like the strength of this episode, Roger Ebert actually gave this episode a pretty good review. Film critic Roger Ebert praised the series in an article in the Chicago Sun-Times the day after it aired. One critic stated that the final episode of Boy Meets World was a great one that wrapped up the series in a very nice, fulfilling way. That was powerfully moving finale. So, I mean, it was appreciated and loved, even though, like, to our points, it's not a perfect finale. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I want to say. It's not perfect story wise. Like what we're about to get to, which is when they're like, "Hey, did you call him? Yeah, he's going to meet us there." And I was like, "Okay. How did Feeny get access to his old school?
You know what?
Hours.
I don't even care.
And for what?
I don't even care.
You
From the moment they walked,
Feeny got the keys to his old elementary school, walked into his old room where it was still set up in somewhat of a style that isn't like, hey, this is someone else's room.
I have to imagine that in the world of Boy Meets World, that the elementary school is probably closer than the high school. And so it was like right down the street kind of thing that they walked to it all the time. But I
who has keys? And who can, like, you just call someone and like, hey, I want to go into elementary school tonight. And they're like, bet.
Siege, let me tell you with my full chest, I did not give a damn how they got in that school. Honestly, from the moment they went to side yard, backyard, and then transitioned into the classroom, emotionally, I was done. I was a wreck at this point.
Yes. No, this is what I'm saying. I'm saying that story-wise, logic-wise, like, you have to let it go.
Yeah.
Because none of it adds up. It's not really, like, before we, like, head over to the school, we get one more clip of Cory and Alan, and I love the choices that they made for Cory and Alan, but we get no selects for Amy and Cory, and we get one little I think we get 2 clips of Morgan that just paint her kind of like
a snotty younger sister. They honestly did Morgan so dirty in this finale. I said it last episode. I'm standing on that ground this episode. I will say that, like, the moment, okay, so everyone walks off at this point, and Cory's hanging out with Justice's family. And then that's the moment where Alan grabs his face, and they cut to that moment where he's younger, where he says, when you have my face, you have my attention. And honestly, it's really hard not to get emotional because you're seeing, like, this television family coming to an end as well. Like, you understand that I felt the emotional tension between all of the actors. Like, I felt like the actors were coming to terms with this being the last episode, specifically Danielle, but we'll get to that later. But in that moment where Cory and Alan are together, I was reminded of what made the show great in the beginning. The Cory and Alan relationship was the core of season 1. And honestly, I don't know that we would have gotten the rest of the series if that Alan and Cory relationship wasn't so well done at the beginning that it sprung, like, we were able to explore this world now because they had established it at home. So I really loved Cory getting that time with just his family. When everyone else goes along, it's like, this is where we started, was just these people. And for, Cory and Alan to have that moment, I thought was really emotional. And in that moment, I'm like, to not give Amy a single scene with Cory, nothing after everything. Like, it just feels like, and I don't know if it's because Amy had the most beef with Cory. Like, they had a lot of arguments throughout the series, but even that, I think you could have thrown in to show, like, the ups and downs of raising a kid. So, like, there was a space that was left empty by Amy's lack of a montage.
Or give them more moments. Like write one. Like, if you don't have a clip, you're a writer. Make it happen,
like, just as an exercise between you and I, like, what clip could they have chosen for Cory and Amy that would have made sense?
Honestly, I feel like that's a question we have to do our season 7 recap on. I feel like I want to actually think about that question is more so what I'm saying. But also, I want to say that there is 7 seasons to pull from, and the fact that we don't, even if we don't have a clip that paints Cory and Amy in a good light, then we should still write a moment for Betsy and Ben. And that's all I'm saying. And I do like this moment of watching this family have to let go of their kids. And this idea that they still have 2 kids at home that they still have to raise. And it's like this life goes on thing. And That reminded me. So there's a podcast, I think it was by Vulture, called Too Long Didn't Watch, which basically they watch the first episode of a show and the last episode of a show and just kind of see like if there's any through thread or like if you can kind of like tell what's happened since. And to me, this finale, this final episode, actually does well, as you were saying with the first episode. You can literally tie a string from what happens in the very beginning of this series to the end, and even our relationships, the development, the idea that Alan would have this moment with his sons more so than Amy would. Again, all of that is there. The fact that we actually leave the episode with Feeny, again, it's all there. And I think that emotionally, this is one of the most successful shows. I just also wish it had a little bit more logic, or a little bit, if you're going to be paying homage to the foundation of the show, I think that we could use a little bit more of the people who had been there from the beginning.
You know, I'll say this in response to that. I've been watching a documentary series on HBO Max. I think I mentioned it before, called The History of Sitcoms. I've just kind of been rewatching it in the background. And it's kind of gone through like, workplace comedies, family comedies, like each episode's kind of dedicated to the history of each kind of genre of sitcom. And the one thing I will say in terms of, now I'm like looking back at like what are considered to be the great series finales of their time, it's always been kind of we're going to kind of pick and choose the memories that we want to focus on. We're going to pick and choose what's going to create the most emotional resonance with our audience, but also the things that we think from a story point will just be a nice ribbon for the finale. And I think that logic that we're looking for and like the specifics, I don't think really existed in television until we got to the 90s and we started seeing more sophisticated storyline from like Sopranos and so forth. So like I just from a television context wise, I don't know that you could have done better at the time that this aired.
And again, I will not disagree with you, because to me, as I said, one of the most emotionally successful television shows. I just think that they weren't thinking about binging in the way that we are. And if you did, like, say you watched the premiere episode and you didn't follow anything, but you did hear that it was going to be the finale of the series and you wanted to check that out, this is a world that makes sense.
100%.
This is something that you find familiar faces, you find familiar characters. You are getting some sense of closure. And actually, it's really funny because I was looking at this and I thought about everything that we were saying, which is like, what is Eric going to do in New York? What is Shawn going to do in New York? Like Jack and Rachel, like I was looking at all the stuff. And in this episode, I was like, maybe the point is that things that don't always end with certainty. Like there are a lot of unanswered questions about these characters. We don't know what their next step will be. All we know is that life moves on, and we have to, very much the thesis of the show, we have to hope that the lessons that we've taught you and the examples that we've set is enough to help you through to the future.
And I think that's a great segue into the classroom episode, because that's exactly how I felt when watching this. Is like, yes, I have so many unanswered questions, but in the same way that Amy, Alan, and Feeny are really not going to know or be involved to participate or to help in the same way that they were before. They really are releasing these kids into the world. We're also releasing these characters into the world and hoping that throughout the time that we've spent with them the last 7 years, that they've learned enough lessons that they'll be able to overcome whatever that next challenge is. And by it being kind of a mysterious question mark, I think that from a symbolism perspective, I think it being the unknown that they're going into, I think plays well in this moment when we're thinking about saying goodbye to children that we've raised. And so in that way, I think that this is what I mean when I'm saying that this makes up for a lot of bullshit that we've had, where I think I'm able to overlook a lot of the questions. What are they going to do in New York? I don't really care now, because what I understand is that I trust Feeny, I trust all the adults, I trust the experiences that I've witnessed, that these characters will be okay.
Well, I think what's important is in this classroom scene when we get some like really fun jokes about like, tell us you love us. This
You never even
idea
talked to
of
another
you don't
kid in 7 years.
exactly. You haven't even spoken to another student. We're your favorites, like that kind of thing. Um, is what we get. But in this moment, those four characters are symbolic or avatars for the entire audience
Yeah.
that has been raised by this show. And you can just tell in the dialogue that they use, you can tell in the way that the characters are playing it. And I just looked at this and I will get there, but like this classroom scene is so perfect in closing what the show's legacy has been.
Yes.
And again, watching it, I was like, oh, I actively was raised by this man. When Topanga says, you've been more of a father to me than my own dad, I was like, that's some of Danielle coming out.
Yeah,
Like,
100%.
there is so much emotion and so many other people relate to whatever all the characters are saying to Feeny. That's how so many of us felt.
In terms of like what Danielle says, I'm sorry, what Topanga says to Feeny in terms of like, oh, you've been a closer father than me, my own dad. I feel like that also could be something from the audience point of view of how like we as kids develop these parasocial relationships with the people we saw on TV. So a lot of times like J. Cole says, our rest in peace, Uncle Phil, you're the only father that I ever knew. If I get a bitch pregnant, I'll be a better you. Like it's like these people that we saw who raised us through television, and Feeny kind of falls in that category. So I don't know if they intended for that to be a symbolism of the way our generation was raised by Feeny, but in that moment, I felt that very strongly.
I feel like it. I think they were. I think it was like we have a lot of problems and a lot of things we can say about Michael Jacobs. I will give him credit where I think he understood the impact and the importance of Feeny as a character, which is why we end on Feeny. And I will say that I think that everything that he's saying is what those types of characters would want to say to the most important teacher in their lives, would want to say to the most important character in their lives. Like that's like he's using their voices to kind of speak for the audience, which is why it works.
Well, the other thing I think that adds to the emotional impact and part of what makes the episode successful is the fact that, we're kind of getting back to the core of the show, which is the student-teacher relationship. One of our biggest complaints from the college years was that they kind of abandoned that student-teacher relationship. Feeny was very involved with Cory's academic life in like the first month he was at college, and I don't think they've talked about education in the last year. So to get back to the root of what made that show successful, honestly, just seeing all of them in that set like really did it for me, because it reminded me of just like, wow, this is what the core of the show was. This is why I loved the show, was because of how it like made teachers significant. We all had that one teacher that was our Mr. Feeny that like made a difference with us. And to get back to the core of that, very much like Cory and Alan seen earlier, I felt like they were able to highlight what made the series special, even if it doesn't reflect the last season.
Completely agree. Well, I just because I know we're gonna get comments where people are like they actually did. We were in Fenny's classroom during the war. We've had lessons. We've talked about majors, all this other stuff. We've done it. But you're right that it hasn't really centered education in the way that if you were to look back at season 1, you would expect it to. Specifically, 100%. And we've talked about like the journey and how much this show pushed for college. It did a really terrible job in terms of showing college. But to bring it back here, and I think it's a reason that we're back in the elementary school as well, because that was kind of what sold the show. Like Feeny's ability to relate to these kids was impactful. And the idea of, again, we had Topanga be like, you were more to a father than me than my own dad. I will never forget you. The idea of Shawn being like, "You never gave up on me," and what that would mean for
Mean to
someone.
him, yes. And you could tell that he says it in a way where it's like, you never gave up on me in a world where I felt everyone gave up on me. In a world where everyone left, you're still here. And I love that because it kind of reminds me of what I was saying when we did the War and Peace episode, when they like skipped to the future and Shawn was like still actively corresponding with Feeny. Like he has so few people in his life that have been there for him that there's no way he's ever going to let go of that relationship. So when he says, "I'll never forget you," tears are filling up in his eyes. I also, again, in this moment where each person is having their individual goodbyes, it's Danielle saying goodbye to William Daniels. It's writers saying goodbye to William Daniels. And when you listen to the podcast and they talk about how much they learned about acting from him and how big of a mentor he was on that set, you can tell that it's just like the emotion is so palpable. You can just feel it through the screen.
Yes, absolutely. I love like those small things in this scene, like when Feeny extends his hand, and instead Shawn just goes for the hug.
Yeah.
Again, that very much like I'm going to keep this professional.
Yeah.
And Shawn being like, "Nah, you don't get to decide. Like,
you don't get to decide.
We're closer than that."
Yeah.
And then the idea of Eric going to Feeny.
Eric saying, I'm a good person now. I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm a good person who cares about people. And like, I blame you for that. He makes a little joke, but like, really, Eric owes Feeny so much. And because of that same reason that like Shawn said, where it's like, you never gave up on me, in a world where even at times his parents gave up on Eric, Feeny never did. Feeny was quick to tell Alan the entire time, Eric's just different. And so I felt like that respect, like it's in a lot of ways, Feeny is the healthiest relationship they have with any other adult in their life. And so to say goodbye to him is he's become a grandfather figure to them all. It's so beyond a student-teacher relationship.
Absolutely. And then we like, but again, even in that, like the small choice of Will to extend his hand,
yeah,
and be funny. Like, no, I'm gonna do a handshake, and then, I'm kidding. Yeah. Again, it's so much fun, beautifully done.
One thing I just want to point out before we pass it, because at this point, Topanga has already left, but when you're watching the classroom scene, when they're all sitting at their desk from behind, you can see her tattoo on the back of her neck that they mentioned that like snuck into the finale. There's like a Chinese symbol tattoo, and that was like, they only filmed the scene once, so they got it, and it wasn't until they went into editing that they saw that you could see the tattoo. So I just thought that like, if you look out for it, that's a little Easter egg.
Go Topanga.
Yeah,
we don't know your full life. Then we get Ben and Will, which is Cory and Mr. Feeny. Yeah. And we get a lot of things. Mr. Matthews, this is where we get the reveal that he goes, "Do you think we're close enough for you to call me Cory?" It's like, "I think we've known each other long enough for me to call you Cornelius," which is a few things. One, I love it. I love a finale that gives you like a last little reveal. Mm-hmm. I always think that's funny. But I also, again, the logic part of me is like, he says, Topanga doesn't even know. You have to use your legal name on a marriage certificate.
100%. That the marriage isn't legal. It's all a sham.
What do you mean Topanga doesn't know this? It's all like it would be on all of your
Also, I just shook my head because I was just like, honestly, of course this dude's going into this marriage with secrets. I'm not surprised.
Oh, can you imagine how angry I'd be if I don't even know your name?
You don't even know my name. You don't know me.
Oh my God. But anyway, I was like, we're just gonna put that over there. Mm-hmm. I like the line of, I got her to go to New York. She's not even scared anymore.
Nor should she be.
I am.
You have every right to be.
Again, it's fun. It's good, but also like I like that vulnerability of having Cory be like, "Hey, I'm scared."
Yeah, I love that. And I love that it's like the whole thing is like Cory's always been scared of the world. He's always been scared of the future. That's the premise of the show. And Feeny's like, yeah, you have every right to be, but in his own way, kind of saying that, everything's going to be okay. One thing I noted this with Ben, but honestly, all the actors did this. It felt like when they hugged Feeny, they just took a few extra seconds. Like specifically the hug between Ben and Feeny. I mean, Ben and Will Daniels. There is so much like I don't know. You could after showing the flashbacks of Ben as like a 10-year-old, 11-year-old or whatever, and seeing him with Feeny, that hug that they have is so powerful.
What we're looking at is Ben Savage, the lead of this show,
Yes.
talking to Bill Daniels, the most seasoned, respected actor in this
Yes.
show. And I can't imagine what that is like to know that you
100%.
both have changed each other's lives intergenerationally.
Yeah. It's a bond that's so clear. And one of the things I love about listening to Pod Meets World, specifically those early seasons, is how astounded they are at the talent which is Ben Savage, that he was able to carry this show, specifically in those first 2 seasons where he is mostly the POV and dialogue, and he's carrying so much of it. And to see him develop as an actor, to see like the rest of the cast have their like emotional, dramatic episodes where we really see how much they've grown within their craft. It really is kind of a snapshot of their entire emotional journey within that moment that they have that last hug.
Absolutely. And then Cory said something which I think is fantastic. And this is what made me really like, I don't know how to say it other than he says, "You will always be with us.
You'll always be with
as
us.
long as we live."
Yeah.
And that was so, because again, I was like, you and I are mid-30s
Yeah.
talking about this show. It is getting revived. It had a spinoff. It's gotten revivals with Pod Meets World.
Yeah.
They are doing tours. There are t-shirts that say Feeny taught me. Like when he said, "You will always be with us as long as we live," I was like, even when Bill Daniels is gone, he will live on.
Yeah.
Through Feeny and through in our hearts. And I was like, they nailed it. They actually nailed what this show meant to a generation and how we all felt about this show.
And to kind of like that Wonder Years aspect of it is that we all have that teacher, that mentor or whatever, who said something or did something in our lives that we remembered forever. So not only are we talking about like the relationship between these actors and these characters, but it's also kind of impossible to, like, as an audience member, not reflect on all of the like people who said something or did something that made such a big it had such a big impact on me in ways that probably they'll never understand, or maybe they forgot that they even said something to me that I stuck with forever.
Yeah.
But like, I mean, if we take Feeny, for example, I could walk up to most millennials and probably quote something from this show and they'll recall it back to me because of that emotional impact. And I also believe that this finale, the way it chooses to end with Feeny, cements Feeny's legacy for our generation. The fact that, like, I think that if Feeny had just been kind of forgotten about after high school, story-wise, the way he kind of was, I don't know that he would still have that same reverence the way he's given in this episode, which I think elevates his status across the board.
Absolutely. And you're right that this episode, specifically this final scene, kind of retcons and cements Feeny as the most important character these characters and this audience has ever met.
Yeah.
And then, as you had pointed out earlier, this is the moment
the greatest.
Feeny actually says the lines that to me are the thesis statement
100%
of the show. It's definitely been the thesis statement of our show.
Yeah.
But hearing it again, and I think when you actually really sit with it, it is so important.
Believe in yourselves. Dream. Try. Do good.
Don't you mean do well?
No, I mean do good.
The dream, try, do good, which has been like, we've ended every episode of our series, of our podcast series, with that phrase, has been something that stuck with me since I originally saw this finale. I think it's such a great summary of Feeny as a character. And it's such a perfect, simple little lesson. Just dream and try and do good. I can't think of a better way to summarize
Well, the beauty
what
of
you would want
it,
your last word as a teacher to be to a student.
the beauty of it is the idea of Topanga being who she is. Don't you mean do well? Because again, if you say, hey, I want you to dream, I want you to try hard, and I want you to do your best.
Mhm.
Like that is like excel out there. That's what you hear all the time.
Yeah.
And Feeny goes, no, do good.
Do good.
Put good out into the world.
Yeah.
Like it's not enough to just be successful.
Yeah.
Be impactful.
Yeah.
That is the true message. And again, as you said, it's like it's her. I know if I'm not mistaken, I think Matt Nelson is the guy who wrote the final words, and he's no longer with us. But it's so important, and it's so impactful, and it's meant so much.
I think it's so impactful that when you reflect on like the finale and like how we were saying how the Peace Corps kind of came out of nowhere, if you're left with the words dream, try, do good, you're actually like on board with them going to the Peace Corps.
Absolutely.
Like they're continuing the legacy of Feeny by doing good in the world. And like you kind of are optimistic about what Cory, Topanga, Shawn, and Eric will go on to do in the world based off of that. So I just think it's such a great line. And even, I mean, the last line, which is the last line mentioned in the series, after the kids are begging for Feeny to say that, tell us you love us, after they go, he just kind of has a quiet moment. He puts his hand on Topanga's desk and says, I love you all, class dismissed. And it's just like, I remember breaking down, crying in tears, hysterical, as if like a close family member died when I originally saw this moment. Like it just broke me because I think in that moment, it really became clear to me as a kid that like my journey with these characters are over. And I think I kind of had some reflections of that while watching it again for this episode.
Absolutely. Like you said, again, I want to say that this is the moment where I was like, oh, they are talking. It was important for him to hold a professional boundary.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was really interesting. I was like, oh, they don't actually have him say it to them.
Yeah.
He maintains, no, there is supposed to be a line.
Yeah.
And no matter how much I feel it, it is my responsibility as the teacher to maintain that line. And I also love that.
I also like how like eventually Eric was like, okay, good for you then. Like, you know what? I know that you love us. You don't have to say it, and I'll respect your boundary in this way because everything we've been through has proven that you love us.
Correct. And then for him to say, I love you all, again, that all was speaking to us.
It was all of us, yeah.
Extended. Class dismissed. Again, in a show that basically was like, hey, I've taught you everything I can teach you.
I can't, bro. I can't talk about it. Oh my God.
It really was impactful, and I was emotional and sentimental, and there were so many things that we have said that we could say about this show, but I don't think anyone can deny that they stuck the landing.
They really hit it out the park. And, I mean, even like coming back from last week's episode where you and I were kind of heated, you and I were frustrated. We did not like where it was going. To completely turn it around in one episode like that, to take us like really, it didn't even feel like a full half hour, like full 20 minutes, because they did the recap. So it felt like such a short episode, but they were able to accomplish so much good for the show and the series within the last chunk of it that it really, like you said, stuck the landing.
And it's really interesting because when we talk about finales, and I feel like we'll have more of these conversations when we do our report card, but when you talk about finales, a finale really can make or break the legacy of a show.
Absolutely.
And it's so great to realize that it's because of this last scene in the classroom. I honestly think it's what helps the show live on.
Absolutely.
Because even no matter what you're looking at, you're looking forward to this scene. So
100%.
whenever we have the hijinks, whenever we're doing crazy, whenever we have bears and monkeys, and there's no mention of Angela and like all this other stuff, knowing that you will hear that last sentence, like even getting to the "I love you all" class dismissed, that makes all of it worth it.
Well, I also think that like your last impression with the person paints how you think about that relationship. It doesn't matter if you guys were best friends for 10 years. If you ended on a fight, it's going to be kind of hard to remember that relationship for all the good things that it was. And I think the television is really similar. For as many people that watched the Seinfeld finale, and so many people were so disappointed with it that it became a part of that show's legacy, was that the finale is disappointing. And like to end it in such a like nice ribbon to where it's so satisfying for an audience, I think just makes you much more inclined to be like, let's start the series up again.
Yes.
Like you're ready to kind of go on board this journey, I think, again, if you wanted to, just because it ends in a way that's so satisfying that you're like, it was all worth it.
Absolutely. Okay, Tony, I think we have to do it. We kind of acknowledged it earlier. Do you have a bruh moment of this episode?
My bruh moment is Rachel McGuire's last sequence of the series being sexually assaulted by a ghost Chet.
Completely agree. Completely agree. That is my bruh moment. On top of, if to add a cherry to that, the fact that Angela is like, they not even discussed.
Yeah.
We will make sure that this is the whitest finale we can make it.
Absolutely.
So that's going to be my last thing. The Feeny lesson.
Train tried to do good. I don't know. What else can you say?
I don't think there's anything other than that. Like I completely agree for all the reasons that we've said. What grade are you giving this episode?
Honestly, this is the A+ they earned. If you would have told me that season 7 was gonna get an A+ episode after all the episodes we've seen, I would have been like, there's no way, especially after last week's episode. But I mean, this episode just turned it around so much. I'm so impressed with how they were able to smooth out the edges of these storylines that really were problematic for us in a way that made it something that we're okay with and we kind of accept, and we're kind of ready to let these characters move on. I just think they did such a good job with it. I think the performances were great. I think the acting was superior throughout. I think everyone kind of specifically the core cast really just showed us at that end point why they were able to capture our hearts for 7 years. And so I just think across, and can I just also give a shout out to Ray Colcord, who does the music for the show, because for 7 years he's been doing the music, and at note, like there's been, I think, no better highlight of his abilities to kind of bring out an emotional response than that scene where Feeny's walking around the classroom by himself before the kids get there, and this music is kind of swelling up, and all of a sudden I'm teary-eyed, and I don't know why, and it's all because of the way that the music played a role in this episode. So I just think it just hit on all cylinders, and everyone gave it like an A+ performance, and so A+ is the grade.
I love that. I because we do things like repeat Jack's decision to go to the Peace Corps.
Okay.
We don't have Angela. We are not making a lot of sense because of that and the sexual assault. I can't give it the A+ that I want to, but it's like a 94. It is getting the A.
Well, I think that is an A+ now. I think America has changed the grading to help us.
We are going with our grading scale. We're not lowering our standards to impress, to
we're leaving children behind. We don't care.
But yeah, absolutely. I just it's absolutely an A episode. And again, I was like, if nothing else, I could have as many complaints about wardrobe and timing and lines, but emotionally, I didn't care. Emotionally, I bought everything hook, line, and sinker. So
absolutely.
Okay, you guys. Tony, there's a few things. One, we have a little treat for you guys right after our homework section.
Okay.
But also, so many of you have been asking, what is your next step? what are you guys going to be doing after this? And I am happy to announce that I will be continuing with Girl Meets World. We are doing Girl Meets World. It's going to be me and, for all of you who know, our friend Danielle Clark, who is from the No More Late Fees podcast. We will be covering Girl Meets World. We have already recorded an episode. We're really excited for you guys to see it. We're going to give you a little sneak preview right here. And we are really excited for the next chapter.
You don't run this class. You want to protest about, no homework. I want to see a plan. I want to see homework. Sit your ass down. The moment that she got up on her damn chair, you must have lost your damn mind. So him yelling at her, okay, but you watch this progress.
Yes.
You let this happen. You are the authority figure. What the hell are you doing? You're letting these 3 kids run amok in your class.
And that's kind of like the thing is I can't help but like compare it to Boy Meets World in the sense that Feeny had control of his classroom.
Yes.
Like you understood that whatever was going on, like Feeny had a watchful eye. So even if there were like side conversations, all this other stuff, Feeny would be like, up here. Or do you want to make this like a classroom conversation?
Right.
But being as Feeny was an authority figure, Cory doesn't feel like an authority figure. He doesn't feel like he has any sense of control in this classroom. If anything, I feel like his character is always spiraling. Like he's trying to control Riley. He's trying to like catch up and like, or he just gives up the wheel. He gives up the wheel to Farkle, and he lets like Farkle has his nameplate.
Yeah.
What does that tell you? You know what I mean? Guys, as we said earlier, we still have season 7 content that we want to give you. We will be doing our report card. We'll be having one-off episodes. We will, if you are part of our Patreon, we will still be doing our Pod Meets World recaps, and you will see us in the Pod Meets World season recaps.
Yep.
So, Tony, what is this other very special treat?
Well, my homework assignment is the app Cameo. If you guys are unfamiliar, Cameo lets you get a personalized message from a celebrity of your choosing, and they have quite a lot to choose from. And guys, as just a little present for me and Siege, and as a little present to all of you, we had a very special cameo from a very special guest that we would like to play here. So I hope you guys like it.
Hello, everyone. It's Bill Daniels from Boy Meets World. On behalf of Tony and Siege, I want to thank you for listening to Bra Meets World podcast. If you're fond of Boy Meets World, then I'm sure you have enjoyed all the stories of love, friendship, and important life lessons. So I hope you always remember the words of George Feeny. Believe in yourself, dream, try, do good. Good luck and best wishes.
Later, bros.
Later, bros. So the Bra Meets World was produced by Siege and edited by Tony Curtis. Bra Meets World is a 2 Free Tokens media production.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
When this boy meets world.
Join Jackie and Danielle, 2 best friends and ex-Blockbuster employees who are rewatching some of their favorite movies from the late 90s and early 2000s on the No More Late Fees podcast. And remember, be kind and rewind.